Welcome to Furthermore. Furthermore is a resource from Legacy Church in Georgia. This podcast is your opportunity to dig more into last Sunday's messages from our Marietta and Canton campuses. You can find more about Legacy Church and our other resources at lcga.info. Now, let's join in as we discuss Furthermore.
Welcome to Furthermore, our podcast about the past Sunday's sermons. My name is Pastor Brent. I'm the pastor of the Legacy Canton campus, and I'm joined today by my good friend and fellow colleague, Ethan Still.
Hey, I'm Ethan Still, and I'm also the host of the 832 podcast.
Oh, wow. Shameless plug for his own podcast. In the first minute, you really are supposed to wait for that until the last few minutes of the podcast.
You know, if they don't get to the end.
Oh, if they don't get to the end.
They gotta hear it now. It's like eating dessert. You have to eat dessert
first. Oh, you're eating
first.
dessert first, so I understand. Wow, you're saying your podcast is the dessert. Ethan and I will have conversations about this later, but today we are talking about the sermons that were delivered on the 27th of December. Pastor Nate was out of town. He asked Ethan, who's in our youth group here at Legacy Church, to step in. And I have to tell you, Ethan, I've heard your sermon before because I heard it at Fall Retreat.
Yes.
And that's why Nate and I, when we were talking about who was going to fill in for him, we were like, why don't we let Ethan step up to the plate? And Ethan, how old are you?
I am 16.
16, and you're a junior, correct, at Sprayberry?
Junior at Sprayberry.
And so junior at Sprayberry and filling in the pulpit at the Marietta campus yesterday. And I tell you what, I'm impressed. That's an honor that's not given to a whole lot of 17-year-olds.
It's
yeah, a little stressful.
Well, it's less of a stressful thing and more like I'm not like, ah! But I am.
It would have been more funny if you were up there. Yeah.
But I am like, this is. I've never done this before. I have never spoken. Actually, I have spoken in front of the church, but like never on like the Sunday morning,
right
after Christmas.
Right.
The last Sunday of
the year, yeah, of a super fun year that 2020 has been.
Mm-hmm.
But I will tell you that it's really cool that you took the challenge, because that's not something that a lot of 16, 17-year-olds would do, number one. But it's your sermon, and like I said, I heard this back at Fall Retreat. And I'm preaching on the same topic at Canton, but it's the quality of your sermon, it's the quality of your thinking, of your theology. For those of you who don't know, like Ethan says, he shamelessly plugged his own podcast, but the 832 podcast that he talks about, which I've been a guest on
a lot, especially in the early half of
the early days of the podcast. It's a theological study podcast. It's an apologetics podcast. So Ethan is one of these guys who really studies the Bible and really dives deep into the Word. And this sermon that we delivered on Sunday yesterday, it was all about being thrown into the fire, as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were. And what can God do when you're thrown into the fire? When I was a little kid, if I was getting in trouble, my mom and dad would say, you fall out of the frying pan and into the fire, which is, the frying pan's bad enough. The fire is much worse. The thing is, though, when we're looking at the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the book of Daniel, what we see is three guys who are being told they have to bow down and worship, this fake god that Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And yet they say, no, we worship the one true God. We worship Yahweh. We worship the real God. And then, of course, they throw him into the fire. And I guess one of my favorite parts of the story, and maybe it's because I remember reading this as a kid and then studying this with you a few months ago for Fall Retreat, and then again for this past Sunday, is that when Nebuchadnezzar sent his guards to stoke up the fire, he got it so hot that it even killed the guards that were trying to push the guys in. It burned them up too. But yet, through all of it, it wasn't just them in the fire.
Right. Yeah, and another thing that really strikes me is they come out, and the fire didn't touch them, but they got out of the fire and they were better prepared to glorify God. Like that was a big thing, because they didn't just come out of the fire.
Right.
They didn't just, nothing happened. They got out and they actually got better because of how they trusted in God during the ordeal.
They were forged in the fire.
Right.
And you and I have talked about this because, I think that I'm a guy who loves the outdoors, and I've made knives and collected them for years and everything like that. And the more you heat treat a blade, the more you fold the metal, the more you hammer it, the more you manipulate it, the more you beat out the impurities, the stronger it gets.
Right. And without guidance, the blade will warp.
Oh yeah.
I was just talking to my dad because I was tweaking this a while ago, and I was talking with my dad, and we actually came to that conclusion. We were like, oh wait, without guidance, the blade gets warped. Without God, you get warped. You get, warped by the world. And so
I took a knife making class a couple of years ago. I think I told you this. Mm-hmm. And you basically take a raw piece of steel and you heat it in the forge, and you quench it, and you heat it in the forge, and you quench it, and you beat on it with a hammer, and you use these automatic hammers, and it's an awful lot of work to make a little bitty knife.
I've never gone through a class, but I've watched a lot of Forged in Fire.
Forged in Fire, great TV show. I also watched that show. Scott and my little son, he and I really like that show. But having gone through that blacksmithing class, and when you sign up for the class, they're like, well, come prepared, bring water. It's really hot in the forge. And it's also, it's about an 8-hour class. I mean, it really is. It goes from like 4 p.m. almost to midnight to make one knife blade. And but that was the one thing I learned, is you can beat on the metal, and you can beat out all the impurities, and you can do all these things. But it's also really easy to get it warped and distorted, and you can destroy a knife blade in just a second,
right,
and never be able to fix it. So like what you were saying is, not only did those guys go into the fire, and when they looked into the furnace, they see all the heat, and yet those are the 3 guys. Even their clothes aren't sins. And in the scriptures, it even says that they didn't smell even like smoke.
Right, they didn't smell like fire.
Right, they didn't smell like fire. And yet they said, wait a minute, there's a fourth guy in there. Right. Who's the 4th guy? We threw 3 in. Yeah,
it looks like the son of the gods.
It looks like the son of the gods. And so Jesus is in there, and God's protecting them. And we see all this amazing thing. And then they come out, and Nebuchadnezzar does a complete 180 and says, no, it's their God.
Right.
So when you think about it, not only did it make them stronger, and it was their faith that they said they wouldn't budge on, and then all of a sudden it's now that they've come out and they've changed the whole community around them because of what the folks had seen. I mean, that's.
I say this, and it's like through their faith they were able to glorify God, and they were perfectly fine dying.
Yeah.
They knew, they're like, God can save us, but even if He doesn't, He's who we're worshiping.
And it's funny that you bring that up, because that was one of the points that rereading the scriptures and getting ready for this for yesterday. That was one of the points that I made, was that they weren't rescued. God did not rescue them.
Right.
He let them go through the fire.
Right.
He let them go into the forge. And honestly, I think about the troubles in our lives, and I know you talked a little bit about this in your sermon, and honestly, the last about 6 weeks of my life have certainly not been the easiest time I've ever experienced. But at the same time, I'll tell you what, I've seen God show up. I've seen Him show off. I've seen Him meet the needs that were necessary, and I've seen Him make my own faith stronger. And I've been a man of faith for a long, long time, but it's not the good times in life that really make you stronger.
Right.
It's the
tough times.
It's the tough times.
It's the troughs. I always like to bring this up because I love the Screw Tape Letters from C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
Because it's an interesting book.
And see, this is one of the reasons I like Ethan so much, because I'm a huge C.S. Lewis fan.
Right, and it's like I haven't read much of C.S. Lewis's stuff, but I have read the Screw Tape Letters.
Fair enough.
And I love that stuff. And that's one of the things that Screw Tape Screw Tape's always writing to Wormwood is about. It's about the troughs that God uses. We the devils try and use the high points, but God actually.
Yeah, God takes the hard parts.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you think about it, someone asked me what ministry life is like, and I know this is a thing that you're thinking about as well. And I always tell them ministry is a roller coaster. Sometimes it's a lot of going up. And you think things are going really well, and then it's whoa, that got really low. And sometimes it spins around. Sometimes you throw up. It just there's a lot of ups and downs in ministry. But then again, there's a lot of ups and downs just in life.
Yeah.
Years ago, we were at a men's retreat. Not you and I, but I was at a men's retreat. And the gentleman who was speaking, and I've said this so many times in sermons and everything else, because it's one of those truths that is absolutely true, but I hate it because it makes me sad. He's just like, there's only 3 stages of life. He's like, you're either heading into a storm, in the middle of a storm, or heading out of a storm. There is no flat water. And I was just like, I hate you for saying that. But I also know it to be true.
Right.
And what happens with the storm, are you going to trust the one who can stop the storm? In Matthew, it talks about, Jesus says, ye of little faith. These guys who are freaking out because there's a storm going on, and Jesus is on the boat going, I was asleep because I wasn't worried about it. And now, why are you so panicked?
Right.
Do you not know who my dad is?
Right.
So
I was chilling.
I was relaxing.
I was just vibing.
Things were fine. And then you got all panicky. But I think your message on Sunday, and my message as well, I think it's really God's going to put you into the fire. There's going to be times when you fall out of the frying pan into the fire, and the question is, how are you going to deal with it? Are you going to allow the impurities to burn off and rely harder on God so that you can become stronger, or are you just going to burn up and turn to ash?
Right. And are you going to be tempered by God or warped by the world?
Right. There you go. Tempered by God or warped by the world. Very cool. Very cool. Well, I think we've pretty much covered the message for Sunday.
Right. This is basically summing it up in what it's all about. In
a nutshell, right there, the faith in a fire. This was the last Sunday of the year of 2020, which has been let's just say an interesting year across the board.
It was predicted to be a great year.
Oh,
everyone was like 2020 vision.
Yeah. It turns out 2020 vision is more like squinting and going, the good news is 2020 January 1st, when the fireworks go off, everything's going to be perfect, right?
Right, totally. No problems.
Actually, really and truly, what's going to happen is we're still going to be in the fire. And we're still going to be dealing with the valleys. And the question is, are you going to let your faith carry you through and let God's love carry you through? Or are you going to be burned up?
Right.
So we all have to make that decision for ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as always, you can check out everything that's going on with Legacy Church at legacychurchga.com. You can join us on Sundays at lcga.live to watch our Sunday services, which are being broadcast each Sunday. Also, you can check out the 832 podcast, which is available on
YouTube, Spotify, most podcast platforms.
Wherever you get your podcasts, you can find the 832 podcast, as well as you can continue to listen to the Furthermore podcast. Ethan, great to have you on the show, and great to have you preaching yesterday at Marietta. And I'm excited for what God's going to do the rest of your life. It's awesome. It's awesome. And we thank you for watching.
Thank you for joining us today. Furthermore is a resource from Legacy Church in Georgia. You can find more about Legacy Church and our other resources at lcga.info.